You have the best numbers on your team. You hit every deadline. You solve problems nobody else can solve. And every single meeting, you sit there watching the same person dominate the conversation. They talk over people. They repeat ideas that were already said. They take up twice as much airtime as anyone else. And somehow, every promotion cycle, they get the role. You get the feedback that you need to be more visible. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The person who talks the most in meetings gets perceived as the leader, regardless of whether they are actually contributing anything. This is not about fairness. This is not about merit. This is about how human brains are wired to evaluate competence, and it has almost nothing to do with actual competence. Researchers call it the Babel hypothesis, and once you understand how it works, you will never look at a meeting the same way again. This is office warfare, where careers are won, lost, and sometimes sabotaged, and nobody tells you the rules until it is too late. I am going to show you exactly why talking more leads to getting promoted faster, the psychological mechanisms that make managers confuse volume with value, why quiet high performers get systematically overlooked, and what you can do to beat the game without becoming the person you cannot stand. Once you see this pattern, you will understand why hard work alone has never been enough. Here is the thing nobody tells you about meetings. They are not actually about exchanging information or making decisions. Meetings are stages. They are performance venues where people audition for their next role without anyone admitting that is what is happening. Every time you sit quietly while someone else talks, you're not being professional. You're being invisible. And invisible people do not get promoted. The research on this is brutal. A landmark study published in 2020 tested what researchers called the Babel hypothesis across 256 participants working on military and business simulations. They measured everything: intelligence, personality, domain knowledge, quality of contributions, and speaking time. The finding was clear. Speaking time predicted who got nominated as the leader more strongly than intelligence, more strongly than personality, more strongly than actual contribution quality. The person who talked the most got seen as the leader, not the smartest person, not the most knowledgeable person, the person who used the most words. One of the lead researchers put it bluntly: we usually think of leadership as being content-driven. Someone says important things, so we follow them. But what they found was consistent evidence that people attributed leadership to those who babbled, meaning they just spoke a lot. The quality of what they said barely mattered. So why does this happen? Let me break down the 4 mechanisms that make loud equal leader in your manager's brain. The first mechanism is the availability heuristic. Your brain evaluates people based on what it can easily recall. When your manager sits down to write performance reviews or make promotion decisions, they are not pulling up a comprehensive database of everything everyone did all year. They are remembering what comes to mind first. And what comes to mind first is whoever made the strongest impression in recent interactions. The person who spoke up in last week's leadership meeting. The person who dominated the project review. The person whose voice they heard the most. Research shows 78% of managers admit their performance reviews are influenced by what employees did in the last month rather than their entire yearly performance. If you spent 11 months delivering excellent work quietly and 1 month being visible, that 1 month carries more weight. Sound familiar? The second mechanism is what Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman calls what you see is all there is. Your manager's brain automatically creates a coherent story from the available information and does not ask what might be missing. When they observe someone speaking confidently and frequently, their brain does not prompt them to wonder whether the quiet person in the corner might actually be more competent. The brain suppresses doubt about missing evidence. It takes the visible information and runs with it. This is why your manager genuinely believes the loud person is the stronger performer. They are not lying or playing favorites. Their brain literally cannot perceive the contribution it did not witness. The third mechanism is the confidence-competence confusion. This is where it gets really interesting. Research from UC Berkeley found that dominant individuals were rated as more competent by their colleagues, by outside observers, and even by research staff, even when their actual answers were no more accurate than anyone else's. In problem-solving groups, dominant people were perceived as having higher skills despite equivalent performance. How? They provided answers first, they spoke more frequently, they used certain and factual language, they maintained direct eye contact, they took up physical space. None of those behaviors require actual expertise, but every single one of them triggers the perception of expertise. Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, a professor at University College London, has spent years researching this phenomenon. His conclusion is devastating for quiet performers. The traits that help people get promoted, confidence and charisma, are often negatively correlated with actual leadership effectiveness. Organizations are selecting for the wrong signals. The fourth mechanism is attribution error. When managers observe a quiet employee, they tend to attribute that quietness to the person's character. They must be passive. They must lack initiative. They must not have much to contribute. Managers rarely consider that the person's role, working conditions, or cultural background might explain why they are not speaking up. The behavior becomes the identity. Meanwhile, the loud person gets the opposite benefit. Their visibility is attributed to competence and leadership potential rather than to the fact that they simply enjoy talking or have been culturally conditioned to dominate conversations. Here's where it gets interesting. These four mechanisms do not just affect individual meetings. They compound over time through something called the Matthew effect. Those who are seen as leaders early get more opportunities to be visible. More visibility creates more perception of leadership. More perception leads to actual promotions. And once someone is promoted, the original perception becomes validated. The loud person is not playing a short game. They are building a visibility snowball that gets bigger with every meeting, every project, every interaction where they take up space. Let me show you how this plays out in real situations. A 2024 study, published in Scientific Reports, used virtual reality to simulate meetings where one participant blatantly stole another person's idea, repeating it moments later as if it were their own. The results were disturbing. Only 30% of observers correctly identified who shared the idea first. 42% mistakenly credited the thief. Why? Because tracking who said what requires cognitive effort that people are not naturally spending in meetings. They are focused on the ideas themselves, not on attribution. The person who says something loudly and confidently gets remembered. The person who said it first and quietly gets forgotten. This is not a hypothetical problem. A 2015 poll of 1,000 British workers found 46% said colleagues had stolen their ideas, and 20% admitted to stealing ideas themselves. The loud repeater wins. The quiet originator loses. Same playbook, different company. The Center for Creative Leadership studied 64 promotions across 3 Fortune 500 companies. What they found? Challenges. Everything we are told about how advancement works. 73% of promoted individuals had prior working relationships with the hiring manager or their boss. In 43% of cases, only one candidate was seriously considered. And 44% of promotions cited comfort level with superiors as a key factor. Comfort level, not performance metrics, not potential. Comfort level. And how do you build comfort level with senior leaders? You build it in meetings. You build it in hallway conversations. You build it by being present, visible, and vocal. Harvey Coleman, a management consultant, developed what he calls PIE theory after decades of observing corporate advancement. He found that performance accounts for only 10% of what determines your career progression. Image accounts for 30%, and exposure, meaning who knows you and what they know, accounts for 60%. Your excellent work is table stakes. It gets you in the room, but it does not get you the promotion. Visibility gets you the promotion. Now look at your own workplace. Think about the last 3 people who got promoted above you or around you. How many of them were the quiet top performers? How many of them were the people who always seemed to be talking in meetings, presenting to leadership, making themselves known? If you are honest, you already know the pattern. You have been watching it your whole career. You just did not have the framework to understand what you were seeing. Here's the test. If you can walk into a meeting today and predict who will get promoted based purely on who talks the most, you are seeing the game clearly. Think about your own meeting behavior. When was the last time you spoke in a leadership meeting? Not asked a question, made a statement, contributed a perspective, took up space. If you cannot remember, that is a problem. Not because you lack competence, but because nobody who matters knows about your competence. Ask yourself these questions. When your manager thinks about who is ready for the next level, does your name come to mind? When senior leaders discuss high potential employees, are you part of that conversation? When credit gets assigned after a successful project, does your contribution get named? If you're not sure, you already have your answer. Uncertainty about your visibility means you do not have visibility. The loud person never wonders if they are being seen. They know they are being seen because they made sure of it. Now, the question becomes, what do you do about this? Because there are really only 3 options. Option 1 is you keep doing what you are doing. Deliver excellent work, stay quiet, and hope someone notices. This is the path most high performers take. It is also why most high performers plateau while their louder colleagues keep rising. Option 2 is you become the person who dominates every meeting. Talk more, interrupt more, take credit aggressively. This works. The research proves it works. But most people cannot sustain it because it violates their values and makes them feel like a fraud. Option 3 is you play the visibility game strategically without becoming someone you hate. Here's what that looks like. First, claim your contribution in real time. Do not wait for someone else to notice your work. When you solve a problem, say it. When you have an insight, share it. When you complete something significant, mention it. This is not bragging. This is documentation. The Obama White House faced this exact problem with female staffers whose contributions were being overlooked. They developed a tactic called amplification. When one woman made a point, other women would repeat it and credit her by name. The tactic forces proper attribution in real time. Second, speak early in meetings. Research on primacy effects shows that early speakers in meetings receive more attention and are better remembered. You do not have to dominate the entire meeting, but saying something substantive in the first 5 minutes anchors you as a contributor in everyone's memory. Third, become the person who synthesizes. If you are uncomfortable self-promoting, become the person who summarizes and clarifies. When you say, building on what Sarah said earlier combined with the data John shared, here is what I think we should do. You are being visible while also being generous. This positions you as a leader without requiring you to dominate. Fourth, document your contributions outside of meetings. Send recap emails after important discussions. Share your analysis in writing with key stakeholders. Create a paper trail of your value that does not depend on anyone's memory or attention during the meeting. Here is the deeper truth about this game. The loudest person wins not because they are playing dirty, but because they are playing the game that actually exists instead of the game they wish existed. You were taught that hard work speaks for itself. It does not. You were taught that competence gets rewarded. It gets considered. You were taught that keeping your head down is professional. It is invisible. The people who get ahead understand something you might not want to accept. Your work is only as valuable as the perception of your work. And perception is built through visibility, through presence, through taking up space in the rooms where decisions get made. The game has not changed in decades. But now you know how it works. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. If this shifted how you see your workplace, hit subscribe. The game has more levels, and I will show you each one.